good. So I'm going to go ahead so I had emailed you the question, or I had messaged you the question about some topics you wish you would have learned about back in school that maybe you didn't really get the experience or opportunity to. Either it's that you didn't get to touch on it at all, or it's something you didn't get to dive into. So obviously I know you're in college now, so you're able to speak more freely anyway, but just keeping it real talk. And, you know, what is it that you feel like you wish you would have learned more about that you didn't get the opportunity to?
So there are several things that I felt I wish I could have learned more of. But I think the main thing that I think that all students should learn about in high school would definitely be time management, because I kind of had to figure that out on my own. And I think that's one of my best attributes. I think I am very good at time management, but I had to figure that out myself, and not everyone has that same discipline, and not everyone has the same busy schedule that I had, which forced me to succeed in time management, because I think that my busy schedule throughout middle school and high school kind of forced me into learning that myself, because we didn't learn that ourselves in school.
I think that's a great point. So do you think it's just for high school, or do you think that could really be applied to any age, really?
I think any age, even when I was in your class in 5th grade, I was still super busy outside of school. Like, my main extracurricular was dance, and it only increased from there. So It was important to have that settled. And especially for students, like, we just have so much going on if you have like an extracurricular, and then also just homework and just other commitments as well, family, friends.
So what helped you, because you mentioned that you feel like you did have strong time management skills, and that's a strength of yours, which from what I remember in 5th grade, at least, I definitely agree. And so what do you think helped you get to that place, or what tips do you have, or what experiences did you have that helped you to get to that place for those students that maybe don't know or not being taught how to manage their time? Because it's not just for students, even for adults. Definitely a skill that we need.
Yeah, I think basically what started it for me was just being busy. I mean, not everyone wants to always be busy all the time, but basically I remember at least in middle school and high school, I basically would have to wake up, go to school, and then after school I normally would have to go to dance. And then I don't remember, it's actually bizarre, I don't remember when I did my homework, but I know I did it.
Yeah.
But it was sometime in the afternoon, or days where I didn't have dance or any other extracurriculars. I would spend those days doing the majority of my work. Not that I was rushing it, but just on days where I have more time, I would make sure that I'm prioritizing my schoolwork. So I feel like another element to that is making sure you have your priorities straight. Everyone has different priorities. In high school and middle school, it was hard for me to like hang out with my friends all the time because I was so busy. But then I also chose extracurriculars where I get to see my friends. So basically, for example, my dance, that's where all my best friends came from. So even though I'm doing something, I'm dancing, I'm still doing it with my friends. So for me, that's kind of like my downtime or my hangout time.
It's like 2 in 1.
Yeah, so I think you just need to make sure you know where your priorities are, because that's where you can kind of decide, oh, I need to do this. So for me, school was always my top priority. I mean, obviously my health would be my top priority, but other than that, definitely my schoolwork. My parents always told me that should be my top priority growing up, so that later on in life, I can have other priorities that maybe are more enjoyable to me to be my top priorities. So that's just always what I did. So I just always would do my homework before I would ask to hang out with my friends or anything like that.
So it definitely sounds like you had some support from parents, which is a huge factor for sure. I think especially when you're younger, having adults or just influences around you that can help kind of redirect you or guide you. So that's definitely a big point. Yeah. Now, what about for especially the younger you go, as far as students that need help knowing how to prioritize, because I think we know what prioritizing means, and we have, maybe like in your case, you said your parents helped you kind of recognize the importance of maybe putting your schoolwork first. But for, let's say, the student or adult that was like, well, hey, I want to, go on TikTok instead of wanting to go and, read the 20 minutes that I have to read for school, or I wanted to sit and watch Netflix instead of going to go and, study for my math test. How would you suggest people get the motivation to say, you know what, no, let me go do what I have to do first and then do what I want to do after?
Yeah, so I think that it's all about having a balance. It's kind of like when people talk about dieting, you can't just not allow yourself any like TikTok or just like going on Netflix or anything like that. And even though I say I'm good at time management, there's still days where I'm just scrolling on TikTok or just watching a bunch of Netflix episodes. But as
Yep.
long as I kind of schedule it, like I'm going to watch a few episodes or watch TikTok for a certain amount of time, then I'm going to read, or I would just read first. Netflix and TikTok aren't going anywhere. So you can just get it done first and then go back, because that's kind of the way that I originally, when I first started my time management journey, I would just start like, oh, I need to just do my homework first. And then after, I can spend however long doing whatever I want, whatever I think is fun. I also make sure I get enough sleep, but
Okay.
that's very important. But because I think also with time management, if you're dead, if you didn't get enough sleep, then you're not doing anything efficiently. And then that kind of messes up that whole schedule as well. Because I think one other important element about time management is that you need to make sure that when you are doing work, you need to be doing it efficiently. So that's why I think it's important to also, like, don't be starving yourself. Make sure you're eating before doing anything. Then also make sure you're getting the 8 hours of sleep that you need, or
So
however much.
would you agree that it's also a matter of discipline, and that sometimes we kind of think about time management as, in terms of, especially for students, I imagine, in terms of like homework or studying for tests, that I'm going to do it in this block of time, without realizing that really it's all connected. So like how much sleep I get is going to lead into the day that I have at school, is going to lead into how much focus I have after school, is going to lead into how much energy I have to either put towards watching TV or doing my work. Like it all is connected. It's not, unfortunately, just one or two tasks. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I've always been one who gets enough sleep at night, so I never really struggled with that too much. But I do remember later on in high school, there were just certain days where I'd have an exam, and unfortunately, I slightly procrastinated, so I would study late the day before. But then that kind of affects my whole day. Like maybe I'll have a coffee so I can have energy for the exam, but then for the rest of my classes, I'm not focusing. And I know when I was in middle school, I had trouble focusing in class. Sometimes, like, I would just kind of zone out. And then that makes it harder on you later, because then you have to relearn what you were doing in class because you have no idea what you were doing because you
Yeah.
were
So
zoned
there's like
out.
a kind of domino effect.
Yeah. So I think like when you're doing something, you should put your full attention to it. So like it's a waste of time to go to class and you're not getting anything out of it. Like while you're in class, you should just think like, well, I'm in class, so let's focus on class. There's nothing else you can do at that time. So that's
It's
what
like
you should do.
being in the moment. That's definitely a skill that takes some learning. And you used a word that I was hoping you would use, which is procrastination.
Yeah.
That's something we all struggle with so much. So how do you feel that, number one, why do you think we do it, especially students? And how do you think we can be more aware of it so then we can address it and maybe try to minimize how much we do it?
Yeah, so I think for procrastination, sometimes it is just laziness. Like, I know I have a tedious task ahead of me, and I know it's going to take a lot of research and time and energy out of me, so I probably just don't want to do it. I know for some other people, and also me sometimes, I know that it's a very important task for me to do, so I'm scared that I'm gonna mess up. So then I just need to be in the right
Mhm.
mindset to make sure I'm doing it as perfectly as I can, basically. So then that's kind of what leads me to do things later on. And even though I say I'm good at time management, I definitely do procrastinate a lot. But I think one thing that helps me was I remember in middle school, we always got, in intermediate school, I think we got agendas.
Yeah.
And so I would always like write everything down in the agendas. And basically now I don't really need to do that anymore with a big agenda, but I do still have like sticky notes on my laptop where I have all my due dates and also just Google Calendar, those types of things. But since I've done it for so long, I probably did it in school for around 8 years. So now I can kind of do it myself.
Yeah.
Because I've
Probably finding what works for you is an important part of this process, which unfortunately we don't necessarily always give or get the opportunity to do that. So I think exposing kids or students to different methods and letting them kind of figure out which one works for them. So sometimes I think we try to make it like a one size fits all, like everyone has to do it this way or this way, and that doesn't always work. So it sounds like you've kind of gone through the process of figuring out what works for you.
Yeah.
And then I really appreciate you mentioned about you being scared that you're going to mess up, because I think research has kind of indicated that what they've found is that a lot of the reasons why people do procrastinate is really comes down to the fear, other than moments where you're just lazy and you'd rather watch a show, which is totally understandable and fine. But that there's a fear attached to failing. So it's like, I'd much rather put it off, because at least then for this moment, I'm not going to fail, as opposed to I'm going to do it and then not succeed. So I think that's an important thing to recognize too. Do you think that it's also kind of, in terms of the procrastination, it's kind of like overconfidence almost, that like I'm going to get an opportunity to try this later anyway. Like I can put it off now because of course I'll get to do it later. Like there's almost a little bit of entitlement maybe in that thinking.
Yeah, I feel like it definitely can be thinking in that way because, you know, basically for me at least, I always do my assignments. Like I was never one to skip any assignments, unless I got a free pass or something like that. But I just always get it done. So in my head, like my mentality is kind of like, I know I'm going to get it done. So then for me, I guess that's a bit of entitlement because I'm assuming that I will finish it. But then if I'm doing it at midnight the day before it's due, then it's just not going to be as good as it probably would be. So you kind of have to think about that too.
Definitely. And so would you say, I know dance for you has been a passion for as long as I've known you. So, and I imagine will always be. Like, that's something that continuously kept you looking forward to something. So would you suggest to other students, like, to find something that they have to look forward to?
Yeah, so I definitely think growing up, you need to kind of find something other than school that you enjoy as well, even if it is related to something academic, but just something other than just going to your classes, because I found that just having an extracurricular that takes a lot of time out of your day, and just where I'm surrounded by a lot of people who kind of are in the same place as me, it really helped because it was something I had to look forward to, but it was also a big commitment for me. But then school was also a big commitment for me. So it's you kind of have to balance everything. So then when I'm in middle school, I remember I would have dance from like 4 to 9 or something, just around that time. But then I would have certain breaks, and there would be the older girls like doing their work during the break. So then that kind of sparked something in me, like, oh, you need to be doing your work now then.
So having the right influences around you and models around you also matters for sure. People that are like-minded. I remember back in college a long time ago, when this is when I was still figuring out if I wanted to be a teacher or a lawyer. So I was studying for the LSAT as well as studying for what I needed to do for grad school for education. And I was also interning at the same time as I was going to school, as I was studying for 2 exams. And I had a full course load. So it was the time that I felt I was the most efficient, and it was the time that I felt most successful because I had to force things into certain time blocks. So it helped me kind of think ahead. And I think being able to think ahead is in and of itself a skill that it doesn't just come naturally. You have to kind of train your mind to think like that. Do you think that that's a strength that you have? You're able to kind of plan ahead?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good trait that I have. And going off of that, I think that people always say like they feel like when they're the busiest, that's when they feel they're the most efficient. And I know like during COVID, there wasn't much going on. So then for the few assignments I did have, like my senior year when it first started, I would procrastinate those because I wasn't doing anything else in the day. So everyone's feeling a little lazy. But then right before COVID, I feel like that was probably the busiest I had ever been. I don't even know how I was managing everything, honestly.
Yeah.
But I was, and that's when I feel like I was the most efficient.
Yeah. What about the other end of this, where time management gets away from us and we're overwhelmed? Everything is piled up. Maybe you've got, I know your dance, you've got your classes. I think you've got your modeling. Because sometimes I think what happens is then kids can then give up because they feel like there's too much. So why bother? I'm done. Right. So what do you suggest in those cases?
Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of those situations for me because there was like a lot going on. I remember like my junior year and senior year, I was stressed about taking like the SATs and then just all of that, like applying to colleges, dance, modeling, school, just everything basically. And I would just be like very overwhelmed certain days, like even crying, very stressed out. And I think I just kind of would need a refresh sometimes. So, like, for example, my high school was 45 minutes from my house, so it's already hard because I have to drive so far. So, maybe, like, at least for my scheduling, we had block scheduling for my classes. So, like, I would have free periods. So then maybe I had a free period in the morning or in the afternoon. So then I really don't need to be at school for those times. So then during that time, I would just be able to like sleep in a little bit or just like go early. So I would have extra time. And even though during my extra time, I was actually trying to catch up on all my priorities, I wasn't necessarily sleeping or relaxing, but just finding, you can always find a little bit of time to take some time for yourself. And the weekends could be a better option for some people, but I was actually I was busier on the weekends sometimes. But just you can always squeeze to find some time. Just like I had free periods at school. Some people may have weekends, or some people might have like a sports practice that they can maybe like an optional sports practice. Maybe you'll take that one off, even if you normally go. Just like you can't have too much pressure on yourself to do everything because you can't be everywhere at once. And sometimes I would have to be at multiple places at once, and that would stress me out. But no one's perfect, so you just need to find some breathing time.
What about, I know there's a big push, as I believe there should be, for recognizing kind of reaching limits in terms of mental health and making sure you're not getting pushed too far beyond. How do you think time management plays a role in mental health?
So I think that time management can kind of lessen the stress on you because, as we've kind of talked about, if you're getting everything done and you have a calendar for everything, then technically everything should go as planned. However, not everything always goes as planned. So I know sometimes I just can't get to everything. Something else might come up, or maybe like mentally I'm just extremely overwhelmed, so I'm not going to spend those 3 hours doing a research paper, and I'll just be doing something that makes me feel good, not necessarily writing a research paper.
Yeah.
So sometimes not everything goes according to plan, so I think it is important to acknowledge that. And I think it's also important to have people that you can go to about that, especially if that stress, like for me, a lot of my stress was coming from school, I would say, since that was my top priority. So having people at school that you can talk to, like I had my advisor, and then also I was close with some of my teachers, just like you. So then I know that I can always like come to you guys and explain like really what's going on. So like for you, for example, I can actually talk about like, oh, I have a dance competition. I'll be away for 3 days, so I don't think I can turn this essay in on time. And just having those relationships, because teachers appreciate that you're doing other things as well. Just
definitely
that like you're growing as people, not just only in the classroom, but also elsewhere. So
absolutely.
I wouldn't be intimidated to talk to them if needed.
So that's a huge tip. And just the idea that you're saying just to talk to them, I think a lot of kids are scared, or they're fearful of maybe doing poorly on, on the assignment or getting a poor grade, but not always realizing what you just shared. So that's huge. Do you have any Athena specific tips and tricks for like time management? Anything you do specifically for you that you would share and can say, oh, this is what works for me?
What I normally do is for all of my classes, I write them out and then I write the assignments I have due for them. So that's what I do on my post-it notes. Like I'll have English, math, etc. And then I have like, oh, this is due Friday, this is due Tuesday. If it's like a test or a project, I normally highlight it.
Okay.
So then that differentiates between regular homework. So I know that the tests and projects are normally more long-term, whereas homework is normally due like within 2 days usually. Basically, once it's assigned, I'll write it down.
Okay.
And then I have the post-it note on my laptop, so then I see it all the time. So then I basically don't, like one thing about me is I don't think I've ever forgotten about an assignment before.
That's
because
amazing.
I'm always looking at it. So that's.
And do you have any as far as like scheduling, like the ways that you schedule in maybe like for dance, or if you have practice, if you have a modeling session, like how do you kind of fit that in?
Well, normally for dance, at least in high school, I remember normally I would have Wednesdays off and then sometimes Fridays. And then normally the weekends I was dancing the full days. Sometimes I wasn't though. So then at least for me, I would know, like for school, I would look, oh, if I have an exam on Friday, then Wednesday will be my main study day. But
Okay.
then there were a lot of instances where I would have exams on Mondays, which for me, that's very inconvenient with my scheduling. So then I know then the week before I need to study on that Friday, maybe if there's off, or if there was a weekend where I didn't have anything, then I know like, okay, that's going to be my main day. So basically just know what days you kind of have more free time. And then if you're a busy person, just like how I was, then knowing where you have the free time to schedule things there a lot.
So again, being able to have that foresight or thinking ahead, I think that's key. So I had also asked if there was any articles, research, or anything that kind of supports the idea of needing to manage time. So was there anything you could share on that?
Yeah, so I did find some articles, and a lot of people were saying, just like how you were saying, how not every box doesn't fit all, especially like how we were saying that we got agendas in middle school. That's not going to work for everyone. I saw an article and it was basically saying like tell your students to maintain an assignment calendar and refer to it every day. So just seeing the repetition and then also seeing the importance of quality in the time that you're spending, like those two things did correlate to having like more successful students and happier students, because being overwhelmed all the time, not having any calendar does lead to not being happy because you're probably very stressed out. So just making sure that you know when things are and that the time that you are spending in your busy day, that you are doing it efficiently, so you don't have to keep doing it a bunch of times, because then that will take more time out of your day.
I also wonder that we are kind of in a culture of, or in the world of social media, where things can seem to just be 24 hours of fun.
Yeah.
And so how do we advise kids or adults on how to find the balance and recognize that not everything has to be fun all the time?
Yeah.
And that, in fact, if you kind of push through with that discipline, that you will get to the actual fun and happiness. Do you find that, or do you feel like, no, it can be fun the whole way through? Or do you feel like you do have to just kind of go through the repetition until you get to the point of fun? Like, how do you see it?
I think like with social media, people always just post their highlight reels. Like even on my own social media, I'm not going to post me like studying at midnight, struggling, crying. It is really a highlight reel for mostly everyone.
Yep.
So you kind of need to recognize that and even take a look at your own social media as an outsider. I've kind of done that where I'm looking at my own social media and it's like, wow, my life looks so great. But then I remember actually like half of this summer I was taking a summer class. So no, it was not all fun and games for me.
Yeah.
But I think also just recognizing that about yourself kind of helps you see that in other people as well. But I do think it's not always going to be fun, but your approach can change your mindset about that. So I'm generally a very positive person. Like, for example, my summer class was probably the most challenging class I've taken. It was accounting.
Okay.
And it was it was very much a struggle. Like, it was every day, and we would have exams once or two times a week. So it was just at a very fast pace. And on the outside, that looks very tedious, and it was also very difficult material. But I was kind of thinking, like, this is a field I could possibly want to go into. So I'm lucky to be given the opportunity to learn all of this new information. So just kind of looking at it as being like very grateful for what you have kind of helps, because not everyone has access to all of this great education.
Absolutely. So kind of a mindset of just gratitude.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So to kind of sum up what we've talked about, great conversation. So you're very knowledgeable and articulate on this. I appreciate that. If you had to, I guess, do top 5 tips on time management, if you had to say that.
I would say think ahead, write it down, be efficient, don't be shy to ask for help, and honestly get enough sleep, because I think that's very important to doing everything.
100%. Definitely. That like seeps into everything for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any questions for me?
I guess, how has your time management been either struggling or just improving as a teacher, and especially during COVID?
That's a great question. During COVID, it was definitely a whole readjustment of everything because, we had the hybrid situation this past school year. So being able to manage the time of those in front of me and aligning it with those at home, that was definitely a struggle because school time and real time are not always the same. Yeah. So you might have students popping in at various times during a class. So that was definitely an adjustment. But I'm happy to report that as the school year progressed, that was definitely something that got more and more, it aligned more and more. Yeah. And I do think that definitely forced me to think ahead differently than I've had to in the past, as far as lesson planning and especially the technology piece. That's not something that we as educators, I think, have had to incorporate as much before as we had to this past school year. So being able to plan ahead for that, because as you know, trying to plan anything with technology is a gamble. So like running things through, is it working? If I have someone logged in here and then someone in front of me, how does that work? So it definitely forced me to push my brain to think a little differently and plan a little differently in that sense. The other things that I do, like post-it notes, writing lists, I'm a big lists person. Yeah. I don't always get to everything on the list. Sometimes I add things to the list just so I can cross them off as I'm doing it, just for the fun of it. But yeah, other than those things have always been consistent in my world, but definitely the technology piece has changed. And now that we're going into this school year with everyone, as of today, everyone's gonna be in person. I'm already trying to plan how am I gonna still use all the technology that I used before, but now they're in front of me, they're not at home. So that's gonna be an interesting shift too.
Yeah. That's very fun to look forward to.
Yeah, if you ever want to come back and teach a class on anything, you can teach. You would be more than welcome to teach. They would love to learn from you more than me. So that would be or modeling or dancing, anything you would want to teach them. That would be amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I want you to keep sharing your writing with me. And
thank you for having me.
Of course. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.